Well, Justen Charters, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, well, we go back a ways, but let me get everybody caught up here on who you are and what you're up to these days. You're the founder of Uncharted, a boutique digital investigations strategic, a boutique digital investigations strategic due diligence and geopolitical risk firm. That's a mouthful, but you guys do a lot of cool stuff. Those are big words even for me. You've taught over 1,000 investigative and intelligence professionals how to utilize open source intelligence, which we're going to, for the audience, open source intelligence, we're going to refer to it as OSINT going forward, just to keep the shorthand going, for everything from beginner to advanced levels that you've taught at. You've saved companies millions of dollars by intervening in high level complex scams. You've helped mitigate risks and threats for high profile people like professional athletes and C-suite executives. You've helped identify threat actors in the United States working on behalf of foreign governments. Definitely want to dive into that a little bit here. And you currently live in Utah with your wife and 2 kids with, I understand, another on the way?
Yeah, 6 weeks away.
Oh, man. Things are getting crazy over there. Well, welcome to Subject Matter Expert. I'm excited to have you on.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, well, let's just get right into it then. I, of course, prepared some questions ahead of time, but excited to see where this goes. I know you've got a lot of really interesting insights out there. But I think just to start this off, the only other intelligence professional that I've had on the show is Doug Pattison, which I think you may know him as well. He's a former CIA case officer, but, his world, I think we talked a lot about human intelligence and that sort of thing. OSINT is a newer and I would call it even, I think it's fair to say, more dynamic field of intelligence. And it's not something that is exclusive to the government, right? So can you kind of give us what is open source intelligence, or OSINT?
Yeah, absolutely. So open source intelligence is, the way that I like to explain it is, you have 3 different layers of the internet. You have the clear net, which we're on right now as we're talking. You have what's referred to as the dark web. Everyone's familiar with that space, like what they see in Hollywood, oh yeah, the bad guys are doing drugs, or, human trafficking, or whatever the case is, right? So those are the 2 layers. And then the other layer of the internet that you have, oh my gosh, I just went blank. The clear net, the dark web, and the deep web, And the deep web is the stuff that search engines don't index. So the things that you would see on Google or you would see on Bing, you don't see those things because those are on the deep web, right? So it might be access through credentials. It might be a proprietary software. It could be something that requires a couple layers to get into, like a criminal forum or something of that nature. And that's what we refer to as the deep web. So what open source intelligence is we take these 3 layers of the internet, and we're essentially scouring these layers of the internet, looking for critical insights to support intelligence requirements. If we're not supporting an intelligence requirement, we're not doing open source intelligence. There's a lot of accounts on social media that say, oh yeah, I do OSINT, and they might have a large following, but essentially all they're really doing is posting videos and pictures and adding commentary to those things, and that's not open source intelligence.
So, I mean, you started off as a journalist. That's how we met years ago, over 10 years ago, I want to say. You reached out, I think, through a friend of a friend, and needed, I think you were looking for a former Army guy or something like that. And we got connected, and it just so happened I was kind of getting into the world of journalism at that time. Or I think at the time we met, I was still just kind of a blogger. I hadn't really gotten into journalism yet. And, that's kind of where you started. How did you get into this line of work? Because this just feels like, yeah, I can see where maybe your journalism background would help going into this as far as investigations go, but this feels like 10 layers deeper than most journalists would go. So how did you get into this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it actually did happen because of my journalist career, and the relationship that you and I built benefited me immensely down the road. A source that I worked with as a journalist reached out to me one day, and he said to me, hey, he said, Justen, can you help us write a travel brief for an executive? And I said, I have no idea what that is. And he said, that's okay. You're really good at research. I think you could do a good job at this. And so I tried it. And I was a travel brief for an executive going to the Middle East. And I already knew quite a bit about that area just because of my personal interest in it. And so I knew how to research it pretty well. And so put together a PowerPoint with a few maps, locations, some insights, sent it back to that particular source. And they came back to me and they're like, hey, you actually did a really good job at this. Normally, if someone comes right out of the gate and they have no experience doing something like this, I've got to edit a bunch of it. I only had to edit a few things. Maybe we'll have more work for you down the road. And I didn't think anything of it other than that was a cool experience. I got to help keep someone safe going, overseas. And eventually they reached out to me probably 3-4 months later, and they said, hey, we got something else we want you to look into. We know you're really good at social media because what I did in all my spare time that I wasn't being a journalist and writing things, I was monitoring ISIS and I was monitoring Al Qaeda on social media. That's literally pretty much all I did anytime I had free time. If I wasn't with, my fiance or something like that. So I learned the tactics, techniques, and procedures, the behaviors online that Al Qaeda and ISIS used. I learned the specific keywords that were really important to them and their methodology. And I learned how to target people who were sympathetic to them specifically in the United States. So when I left the journalism career, I transitioned into working for, I'm not going to say who, just because of non-disclosures and things like that, but an organization that specifically focused on targeting domestic extremism here in the United States, in addition to in the UK at times. And so I got a lot of experience writing social media intelligence reports that were based on the behaviors and the things that people were posting who were sympathetic to a variety of different domestic extremist groups. And that's kind of how it just all got from where it went to where it continued to go.
Did it take a while before you fully admitted this is my new path in life? Like at what point did you say to yourself, I'm not a journalist anymore, I'm an OSINT expert?
Oh, expert. So oh man. So the only time I ever thought of myself as an expert, to be honest, is when a former CIA case officer reached out to me by the name of Valerie Plame, and everybody pretty much knows who she is just because of the way she was leaked into the press, many years ago. She reached out to me. She said, I heard that you taught OSINT to Jack Barsky, who's a former KGB agent, and obviously not a KGB agent anymore. And he said you were really, really good at what you did. And he said he learned a ton of things. I was wondering if you want to come to speak at my conference. It's called Spies, Lies, and Nukes. So essentially, it was a bunch of former CIA case officers and people who, hunt down real spies for a living or, recruit people for a living to spy. And I was the dude who was the nerd with the laptop. And I felt like at that point, and that was, I think, 3 years ago, I was like, okay, maybe I'm an expert now.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I love so far about this show is almost every single person that I've had on here has said, I don't know if I qualify as an expert, but, and it's just like, man, I love the humbleness and you've been doing this for a long time to great effect. And if you're being asked to come in and talk to intelligence professionals, one, is that a little bit of a pinch me moment for you? And two, I don't know, for you, if I were in your shoes, I would almost have a little bit of imposter syndrome saying, are you guys just having me come in here to amuse yourselves? Because you guys are the CIA. You must have better trained people than me, right? Like, did you feel that way at all?
So I had previously worked with some case officers on some projects in the OSINT space where they needed some support on some much larger moving pieces type of things. And so I knew a few, but I didn't know a large amount of them. The thing I was most intimidated by was that I was going after legends, essentially, in the CIA, like the chief of disguise, the guy who, helped stop the nuclear programs in the Middle East or disrupt them. People who their child hung out with Assad when they were, or Assad, their child hung out with Assad's kid when they were overseas. So these people were they're so well known. I mean, they've been on TV, they've got books out, they've got movies, so yeah, I was intimidated by that factor, and that made me really nervous. But it was funny because once I took a few breaths and I just chilled, it just flowed so well and it went so well. And I probably had 30 people come up to me after that. And it was really a life-changing moment in that regard.
Well, I can't even imagine. And clearly you're somebody that's done enough to impress a group like that. I feel pretty comfortable having you on here as an expert. So, let's get into the meat of this here, though. I have so many questions about China and Russia and different, whatever you want to call them, large scale or near peer threat actors around the world. But you've specifically flagged coordinated networks that are amplifying Chinese narratives. Some would call it propaganda. What patterns are giving them away? And is it hard to spot, I guess? Like, well, what are you looking for when you're looking for Chinese influence operations?
Yeah, so that's a really, really 50,000 foot question, and I'm going to try and break it down a little bit more for you. So there are a variety of different types of influence operations. So yeah, you do have the information operations that you see online. I've been more involved in identifying actual people with ties, physical ties, right, or literal ties to the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Liberation Army. Now, I'm not going to get extremely detailed in that just because of how sensitive a topic that is. But what I will say is there are patterns that you see, and you see this with China and you see it with Russia specifically. They like to set up nonprofit organizations in the United States and claim that they are there to create friendly ties between both countries. And while some of those organizations do just that, there are several that do not and work directly with a organ of the Chinese Communist Party called the United Front Work Department. The United Front Work Department has a couple branches which are responsible for foreign influence operations outside of China. Now, one of those branches actually, they target dissidents on U.S. soil. So people within the diaspora community who are Chinese that might say something that they shouldn't say just because it doesn't align with Chinese Communist Party values. And then there are the people who work on the foreign influence operations where it's a lot more broad, I guess you could say a lot more broad, because they're actually trying to build economic ties back with the Chinese Communist Party through maybe several different shell corporations that are tied to the nonprofit organization. But they've developed relationships on the ground with a lot of key influencers and decision makers. And what we see often is those those influencers aren't doing their due diligence. They aren't actually realizing who they're doing business with. And so there's a lot of gaps, if that makes sense.
And you brought up them targeting Chinese dissidents or the diaspora. That was a topic that came up with Doug Pattison on that previous show that I did with him. And he brought up, there's news reports that are out there about the CCP setting up literal police stations in the Chinatowns of New York City and a few other stations that have been busted by the FBI. And there is actual codified law in the CCP about their ability to kind of go after anybody that's of Chinese origin to collect information and that sort of stuff. And, when he first brings it up, it sounds unbelievable. And then I did a little bit of research afterwards, and there's not nearly enough reporting on it as I expected to see. How deep does that go? And I mean, have you talked to actual targeted Chinese people that are no longer, or trying to break affiliation, I guess, with the Chinese government? So
I have a very soft spot in my heart for political dissidents. So I have spoken and am very good friends with some dissidents who are targeted by various countries. Let's put it that way. Now, you talking about the Chinese police station in New York City, that's a really interesting story, because when you break that down more into the things that maybe you didn't see in the media and stuff, the guy who actually ran the organization that was the Chinese police station was renting out that space from a nonprofit organization. And I mentioned the nonprofit thing, how those often are fronts for the Chinese government. And two of those individuals who were arrested by the FBI, one of them went by Harry, I believe, Lu Jianwang. I'm probably butchering that. I'm just starting actually learning Mandarin too. So for those who speak Chinese, forgive me. But anyways, interesting about him is he has been doing all different kinds of stuff that would be a concern for years and years. And there are some things that we see with these people who target dissidents. And one of those things that we see is they are always attending these rallies that are against anything that's, I guess you could say, like pro-freedom for Chinese people. So it's an anti-Hong Kong rally. It's an anti-Taiwan rally. And there's a really interesting thing about this. And this, one of the things about OSINT is really cool, right? Is that, 20 years ago, and I've talked to my friends that are former FBI agents about this, you had to go and do surveillance 24/7 to figure out what was going on here and what was going on there. And now with the advent of social media, we can learn a lot of different TTPs by just analyzing data sets that we see. So let me share one of those data sets, or I guess you could say TTPs, that we've grown familiar with when it comes to those people who are part of these front organizations. When you see those events where they are being aggressive against dissidents, or they are pushing back against some pro-freedom or pro-liberty type of narrative, the shot callers of those organizations are always in the front row without fail. So if you analyze photos or video from those events, you will see that. That's actually something that I typically teach in my open source intelligence classes, but you and I go back a long ways. So I am sharing that now.
Giving me the goods. I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of one of my questions here is you talk about some of those things 20 years ago that FBI agents had to use. I mean, you have been doing this for about 10 years now, from when you first started to dip your toes in, I guess. What tactics were you using when you first started that still matter? Or is there anything that has become obsolete as technology has moved on?
Oh, it's become way harder, but that makes you a way better open source intelligence analyst. So when I first started, the technology that was available to dive into somebody on social media, I mean, it literally would hit every red flag in privacy that you can think of. Facebook had this option where if you had a tool to access it, you could have what's called graph search. Graph search would let you see everything about a person. And I mean everything. Not just your likes, not just your friends, not just, your posts or your check-ins or something like that. I could see what you hovered over, not even what you clicked. Okay. Graph search was obsolete though in June of 2019. So that was used by a lot of investigators to go after sexual predators, a bunch of different threat actors and things of that nature. And so they had to pivot. And with open source intelligence, you're always having to pivot. I'll give you another example. So 2 years ago, I could access a lot more information on the Chinese internet behind its firewall because they didn't have as many security protocols in place and they weren't as concerned, at least publicly, about what was online. Today, to access some of those sites is almost impossible without some very, very advanced and solid tradecraft is probably the best way I can put it.
That's wild. And yeah, you look at the way China has changed a lot of their approach to cyber. I mean, I still remember when I was running Coffee or Die, how we would get DDoS attacks originating from China and originating from Russia. They weren't even trying to hide it through VPNs or anything like that. They were very brazen about that. And it sounds like maybe some of that has changed, or they've become more sophisticated, or just maybe care more. And I kind of wonder, we've seen a lot of governments crack down on social media. And actually, I've got so many questions. I'm trying to organize them in my head right now. I don't want to move past that graph tool that you were talking about. You said that became obsolete in 2019. Is that because that's terrifying that existed out there for people to look at? I mean, that's absolutely terrifying. Right? Two, I mean, I don't have a lot to hide, but geez, that you talk about, just a sense of privacy being completely smashed. But the you said that went obsolete. What replaced it, or did anything replace it? What was it? Something that got shut down because of privacy concerns, and there is no replacement for it? Or
I don't know the full reason behind shutting it down. I'm assuming most of it had to do with privacy and maybe some cyber issues. I know that the only way you can actually scrape information off of Facebook in that same way is if you're law enforcement and you're working directly with the company. Other than that, you don't have a shot. You have to learn how to do everything manually. You have to learn how the infrastructure of the platform works. And if you don't know that, you're going to be way, way behind other investigators.
And you don't have a programming or coding background yourself, do you?
No, I don't have a programming or coding background. No, but I've learned some stuff here and there just because of how long I've been doing this, obviously. But
yeah. And you're picking up foreign languages on top of it. You said learning a little bit of Mandarin. While you were researching ISIS and all that, did you pick up any Arabic or were you trying to? Or
I was learning Arabic for a while and I really struggled with some of the T sounding stuff. Mm-hmm. And I had so many other things going on, like getting married, that I was like, you know what, I'm not going to do this anymore. So no, I didn't take it seriously. I mean, when I was learning everything that I could learn about ISIS, I still didn't approach that the right way. My OPSEC, let's just say, was terrible. Mm-hmm. I didn't even probably know what OPSEC was when I was doing that, because I was reaching out to accounts. I was talking to my buddy who did speak Arabic, and I'd ask him to translate something for me, and he'd translate it for me. And then I'd do something dumb, like reach out to the guy who put that statement out and just see what he was thinking, trying to understand his thought process of why he believed what he believed. Essentially because I was just trying to sift information from him so I could understand better how I could find out about, this specific threat group. And I highly doubt I really ever talked to someone who was a member of ISIS. They were probably all sympathizers, but it was still stupid. When I think back about it, I'd be like, one of my students told me that. I'd be like, you're an idiot. Don't ever do that again.
Yeah, I mean, you don't know what you don't know until then. And yeah, as far as speaking Arabic goes, I just like to impress Uber drivers when I throw a little assalamu alaikum at them, and they think that they appreciate my effort. Unfortunately, all the Arabic I ever learned was pretty aggressive and not particularly useful in polite conversation. And I don't remember most of it at this point anyway. But yeah, as far as OPSEC goes, I mean, even what you do right now, I mean, I just imagine you're probably not traveling to China anytime soon, I'm sure that the Chinese government, the Russian government, other places around the world are probably aware of at some level of Justen Charters and what he's doing. Well,
let me speak to that. I've had a couple instances that are a little bit scary, right? Because you can have the best OPSEC in the world, but no one's perfect, right? Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody has a vulnerability. Anybody who tells you that they don't is a liar. That's just the bottom line. Everyone's made a mistake. And you learn from those mistakes. I was doing some research and following some of the supply chain when it came to precursor chemicals from China, specifically piperidone, which is used to manufacture fentanyl. So the cartels use that to manufacture fentanyl. They pass it across the border. The chemicals come from a precursor company in China. Now, China said that they're going to crack down on that much better after this new deal with Trump or whatever. I mean, that remains to be seen. I wouldn't hold my breath on any promise that comes from the Chinese Communist Party. But I got an email from a Chinese precursor chemical company trying to talk to me and say, hey, you should come down to Beijing and talk to us and da-da-da-da-da-da. Obviously, I never responded to it, but it freaked me out because it was like, oh, okay, I did something wrong along the way looking into these 23 or 24 companies, and this person's reached out to me. One of the things about open source intelligence is even if you're super good at it and you know what you're doing and you're being smart about it, you have to recognize that the bad guys have research teams too. Mm-hmm. They just don't abide by the same ethics, laws, or principles that you do. And so there's definitely some risk involved.
I mean, that's been I don't know that I want to call it an issue, but just something that intelligence professionals of all stripes have been dealing with for a long time from America. America abides by a certain moral code. I know a lot of people would laugh at that, and but really, I mean, everything from what money we give to aid organizations in Africa to how we conduct intelligence and certain lines that we won't cross and things like that. There's what I've had multiple people tell me: China, Russia, they don't have the same moral qualms as we do about doing certain things. And that's, even you as a non-government employee, like you have a moral compass, like and the people that you're going against, I imagine, don't necessarily, right?
Yeah, the moral compass would be very far from a lot of the threat actors I look into. That's for sure. It's a wide variety. I mean, it's a very, very multi-layered cake of bad guys, but I mean, maybe some of like the low-level fraudsters and things like that are more desperate. And especially when it comes to things like those romance scams where the person catfishes the elderly person, and in reality, that person's actually in forced labor, being forced to do that in a blacked out building in Cambodia or Laos or something like that. Probably different in that area. But morality is real far down from the totem pole for the people I look into most of the time.
I tell my kids all the time, the world is a lot worse than you realize, and it's also a lot better than you realize. Like a lot of people don't realize how good people are, and the other side of the coin is just as far in the opposite direction. As there's a lot of people, you don't realize how bad people can be. And it really is unfortunate. But kind of going back to social media a little bit there, we've seen governments crack down in various ways, not just the US, but others. Obviously in the US here earlier this year, the TikTok ruling was upheld in, I think, January, I want to say. And then the EU's DSA, is kind of testing a bunch of different platforms on their transparency. What sort of practical changes do OSINT investigators that are, on the ground in the field like you, how is that impacting you guys and your work?
It just depends. It just depends on what the policy shift is. I think more often than not, we like to think both analytically and creative. So we look at it as a challenge and like, hey, how can I get around this the best that I can? But there are some things that you really can't get around. I'll give you an example. So, everyone likes to Google things. Google's the most popular search engine on the planet. Google used to have an option where you could look at cached information. So an archived page of whatever that website was, even if that website's been deleted or whatever the case is. It was a huge advantage when you were doing the forensic side of your investigations to be able to see certain data that you might not see just out in the open. I can't remember exactly when Google got rid of cache, but they got rid of cache, then Bing got rid of cache, and it became a little bit more difficult to get some of that deeper archived information. And that was a disruption I saw for several people. They felt like, oh man, this roadblock, what am I going to do? And you can't give up in those situations. You just got to be like, hey, it's just how things change. If you're doing human, if you're doing direct action, whatever, things change. You have to shift. If you don't shift, I don't want to say you die, but you definitely don't succeed. So.
Yeah, it doesn't make the job any easier, I imagine. How am I overestimating how much of an impact social media plays in this? Because like you said, there's 3 different layers or domains that you guys play in. So
let me talk about some data sets, like when we're talking about open source intelligence. So social media would be one data set. Then you'd have things like business records, patent information, legal records that were as far as open source could be. So like county records, for example, if I want to see if somebody has civil or criminal lawsuits in their history, I can go on a county website. More often than not, it's getting more difficult for some counties, stuff like that. And I can plug in your first name and your last name or your business, and I can start to build essentially a dossier on you. So, hey, I know your social media now. I know your businesses. I know what your criminal and civil history is. What else can I figure out and find out about you? Do you have personally identifiable information that's out there online that could be leaked? And I say that I do a lot of threat and vulnerability assessments for my clients. So if I'm trying to protect someone digitally, I'm trying to limit their digital exposure. And a lot of people have their information on data broker websites everywhere. There's hundreds of data broker websites out there. All the bad guys know about them. And if you ever wonder how people get doxxed, it's about as simple as just figuring out which data broker websites have someone's personal information, and then they just throw it out there. It's not as sophisticated as some of the cyber criminals might make it look.
Yeah, I mean, every time you hear on the news, and it feels like at least once you hear on the news, some big major company had a big, massive data leak, and you don't really hear of anything that comes from it. Well, the thing that comes from it is, like you said, there's hundreds of these different data brokers that now have access to that. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago when I think it was Experian, which is a major, credit reporting agency, like all of their data got leaked. I remember back in, I think it was 2012 or 11, where the database that stores every SF-86, which is the background of, if you're trying to get a clearance in the military, like a secret or a top secret clearance, you fill out an SF-86. It's got all of your most personal information on it. And there's a huge database of that was compromised back in 2012. And so, like, if you served in the military before that, chances are somebody somewhere, even whether it's a government or private data broker or both, has all that stuff. That's where the illusion of privacy for me really left, to where, like, yep, I know people. I can tell you by the amount of spam messages I get every day, my shit's out there, and I guess I just quit. Like, if my SF-86 is out there, then what else am I going to reasonably try to hide at this point? I don't know. But I mean, you bring up doxing, though. That's a good point. Like, do you have, especially when you're going after like bad actors, I don't know. I want to take it like, when these really public, like riots or things like that happen, do you have like a personal red line when it comes to doxing people involved in those things? Like, how do you weigh public interest versus personal harm, that sort of thing?
Yeah, no worries. Actually, I won't dox anybody unless it's part of like a legal thing or something like that. If someone's asking, hey, this person's behind this, I need to see, who this person actually is behind this social media alias or whatever. I'll never publicly dox anybody. Everything that I do is private. I really try to keep all that stuff really on the DL. Going back to breach data for a second, though, I think let me explain a little bit more about what breach data is and the difference of that between like a data broker taking your personally identifiable information. A breach data is when one of these threat actor groups or advanced persistent threat groups, hacks into a large institution, organization, business, and they get everything from people's passwords to their credit card information to, all different types of sensitive files. So as an example, and I'll bring one that's really a lot older, so it's not like too sensitive. 2016, Qatar had its bank with a national, or not a national, well, I call it a national security breach. I guess it's a large financial institution. They had a data breach, and in that data breach, if you looked at that file and you reviewed the contents of that file, the operational security end of Qatar at the time, which I've told by various people has improved significantly since then, was so poor. They literally had a file titled spies in that data breach, where they had information on people, pictures and job and all that type of stuff of who they thought, were spies, or maybe it was their spies. I don't really know. I don't have a relationship with the people, the bank over there, but really interesting to see how data breaches over time have actually increased the operational security of certain organizations, because you never see that with a financial institution in a country like Qatar today. Like, I should say a major financial institution. Everyone has a flaw here or there.
I don't know. Is it you got to burn your hand on the stove once before you learn that the stove is hot?
Yeah, I think that's definitely probably the case.
Man, it's wild that places as times as recent as 2016. I mean, that feels like a lifetime ago. Anything on the other side of 2020 feels like a lifetime ago to me. I think that's the case for a lot of people for a variety of reasons. But 2016 is only that's less than a decade ago, and it's wild to think that sort of brazen disregard for keeping everything locked down was happening by as big of a player as Qatar is. Like, they're a major international player. So I don't know. It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
So looking at, I recently had a humanitarian on that does a lot of work in Africa, and there's, about 122 million people that are forcibly displaced as of about April of 2025, according to the UN. Has the global, I guess, like displacement map changed your workflows, like regarding languages, sources, things like that, with how many people are displaced into areas that they weren't previously?
No, not really. I have done some more humanitarian focused OSINT stuff in the past. Most of that was focused on the first 3 or 4 months with the Russia-Ukraine war. But outside of that, I really haven't seen any like displacement stuff shift my priorities or things that I need to learn. I've had a pretty strong focus on like Eastern Europe, East Asia, obviously the United States, and some of the Middle East.
Well, I mean, I guess when you're researching people, is the fact that there are, a lot of these people that are forcibly displaced, they're the more vulnerable populations. They're the people that may be coerced into some of these hacking farms or scam farms, that sort of thing. Does it make it difficult that if you're researching one of these places in Cambodia and not everybody there is Cambodian, you're speaking Cambodian, does that make it more difficult, I guess, because they took in some refugees? Like, for a great example is during the Afghanistan evacuation, a ton of Afghan refugees went to Uganda, of all places. And so now you've got Pashtun speakers in Uganda. I mean, does that make things more complex for you? Or are you flying at a higher altitude to where that doesn't really impact you?
You know what? That's it. I think it's like a case by case basis type of thing. I really can't give you a good insider answer to that. I definitely think that those people become more exploitable, but I feel like I have enough resources in place with my firm and all the other networks that I work with as far as working professionals, that there's not a lot that we can't do as long as we're operating within, ethics or the certain boundaries. And if it starts to go above our head to where it's like, hey, this needs to go to, a 3-letter agency or something like that, then it just turns into a deliverable and it goes to a 3-letter agency, and that's just how it goes.
Yeah.
So,
it just speaks to how complex this line of work can be, I guess. AI, how much more difficult, or is it enabling your job? Is it making it more difficult? Like, how has the proliferation of AI impacted the OSINT world?
That's a great question. Okay, so AI is definitely causing a disruption. AI hallucinates a lot still, and I would
what does that
anybody
mean? What does AI
that
hallucinates mean?
Yeah, sure. AI hallucinates. That means that you ask AI a question and it makes something up as a response and acts like it's a fact. So it says, oh yeah, according to blah, 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 it's blah, blah, blah. And some people take that at face value and they don't check it or verify it. I'll give you an example. Deloitte in Australia, I believe, put out a report for the Australian government that used AI to write a lot of their report. And I'm sure grab some of their findings because some of the information was completely incorrect. So AI is being seen as a shortcut for some people. I don't have anything against AI being used as a tool because it is an effective tool if you're building the right systems and things like that. But at this point, I see it as a foundational thing that might be able to teach you a little bit more, act as like a really just beginner lead for you to learn more about a specific issue, topic, threat, whatever, because there's a lot of things it can't do. Like if I went on ChatGPT or Gemini right now and I asked it to access a certain site on the Chinese internet, it would be like, no, I can't do that. Right? I mean, I can do that as a person. Why can't you do that? I thought AI was the greatest thing in the world. So yeah, it's disrupting for sure. People are looking at it as a shortcut. I think it's going to continue to disrupt. But at the same time, I think a lot of those companies are going to come back and be like, well, it's not really where it needs to be right now. We need to bring back these analysts that we laid off or fired. And I think it's going to open up more opportunities for the people who are really understanding what open source intelligence is. Because what AI is doing, in my opinion, in some respect, not completely, but it's creating like buttonology analysts. Like, hey, open up a dashboard on your browser and put in a word and then click a few buttons and you're going to get all the information that you need. Well, what happens if that tool's broken? Like, what are you going to do? You don't know how to do anything. So that's
essentially the way that I use it is, it's like a really good Google for me where, hey, can you suggest me 10 different articles on this topic so I can get quickly read up on this? I don't trust their AI summaries because, like you said, they just tend to be really accurate or things. So I'll ask for the source material, like, hey, give me a list of articles or recommend me 3 books on this topic or, things like that. I've used it for contact information for reaching out to certain guests and things like that. And then, you got to click through to make sure it's actually correct. But, there's definitely uses for it. But I think with AI, something like some of these video engines and things like that, like I imagine analyzing publicly available video of especially in sort of crisis situations where there's a lot of video hitting the internet. I'm sure you have to like sift through that to a certain degree. Is the fact that there's now going to be a lot of AI. I mean, before the problem was people taking very realistic footage from video games and portraying it as real footage and having to, I feel like part of the job was like, no, that's not real. That's from Call of Duty in 2012 or whatever. Now it's like you can literally make really realistic, especially the grainier it is. It looks kind of like it's, bad GoPro footage or whatever. I mean, some of the stuff looks really, it's not AI slop. It looks very realistic, especially to an untrained eye. Like how... Is that now, like, before you can even start to analyze video, you got to figure out first what's real video and what's AI generated?
I think there's some telltale signs still if something's generated by artificial intelligence. So for a trained eye, you can watch a video and know, hey, that's AI. That's not AI. I think it's going to get better, though, and it does kind of terrify me how synthetic the online environment is going to become once that becomes a lot harder to distinguish. So I'll give you an example. Artificial intelligence before ChatGPT had like Sora and Gemini had whatever its video platform is, and people were making these videos, and AI was still pretty easy to spot, right? They have this platform called This Person Doesn't Exist. It still exists. You could literally just go on a website right now and type in thispersondoesn'texist.com. And it's all artificial intelligent or AI generated portraits of people. But there's telltale signs that these are actually AI generated portraits of people. So if you zoom in on the teeth of these individuals, you'll see that their teeth are pixelated, and you'll see that there's not a lot of symmetry to the face. You'll see that it looks like a lot of the women are wearing weird looking earrings. Their hair is wispy. I mean, these are just a few of the signs of poorly generated AI images. But that doesn't change the fact that threat actors and front companies and those involved in illicit or criminal activity or going against, U.S. policy, want to disrupt national security, whatever, that they use these images on places like LinkedIn, and they say, hey, my name's Bob Jones, and I'm an investment director for blah, 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 and I'm here to recruit people to help us with our intelligence program so we can build ourselves a really cool-looking, effective large language model to help people with venture capital or something like that. And then it turns out that Bob Jones doesn't exist. You tie him back to China. You probably tie him back to the United Arab Emirates, not because it's a UAE-based thing, but it's because China likes to sometimes use the UAE. And, you just see, oh, okay, this is, how they're using this stuff. But people get fooled really easily because we live in the age of, and it's worse than it was when you and I first discussed this long ago. I mean, the age of sound bites. I mean, that's what it was before. And now it's just everybody wants to believe what they want to believe, and they won't take 2 seconds to look into it. So since they're not doing due diligence, it makes it a lot easier to fool people in crimes on social media. And, people aren't interested a lot of the time with this stuff too, until they're personally impacted by it. I had a client, old lady, who was catfished by a guy who claimed to be an army general. And he got like $1,500 out of her, but she's living off of Social Security and has a little bit of money coming in from her kids. So $1,500 is a lot of money to this old lady. And, I was able to see that this guy who, obviously wasn't an army general or anything like that. But my point is, I mentioned that to some people, and I was like, I'm going to give a free class where I show people how to, look at certain signs for fraud online, some of the deeper stuff so you guys can avoid it. And I had like 3 people attend that class. It should have been 30. It should have been 50. Now, that was the first time I did it, and it ended up growing a lot more in the future. But the point is that people are complacent until it happens to them. They want to live in their bubble. They want to think that everything is fine. But if you put a post on social media today and said, do you know somebody who got scammed by someone on social media? You'd have at least 2 or 3 people respond to that and say, yeah, I know someone who lost $5,000. I know someone who lost $10,000. I know someone who lost $100,000,
Yeah, I mean, it's very real. And, taking it a step further, things like deepfakes and some of this AI generated video, it's in its infancy right now. Let's fast forward 2.5 years as we're ramping up to the next American election. What ramifications do you see coming at that point? Just like assuming that technology continues to get better exponentially as it has already. Like we can only assume it will continue to exponentially increase in capability and effectiveness. What are we looking at as far as the viability of elections going forward? Yeah.
So when I was a kid, I don't think I could have ever imagined even living in an age with the technology that we have today. 2.5 years from now, I think the level of verification is going to feel like the most insane invasion of privacy, because AI is going to be able to manipulate and create the most realistic synthetic stuff that are the level of verification, I think, is going to be insane, because people are going to be so concerned and so worried if this is real, if this is fake. And it's going to be a really, really hard thing to navigate. And because of that, I see a lot of content coming out that will probably cause some level of disruption, in the United States. I think that's just a reality that we have to accept, and we have to be prepared for it. And I can't say that people who need to be on the complete up and up with this stuff are always on the up and up. But it's always, and I don't want to say that as a negative either, because I want to say, even though they're not on the up and up, you have to understand that this is such a exploding field and things are evolving so fast. It's so hard to keep up. So it's a huge challenge.
Yeah. We're already on the 5th generation of Chat GPT at this point, and it just came out a year ago. Yeah. Not that long ago anyway. It's pretty wild to see how it's evolving. And I constantly tell people, AI is not limited to just large language models. That is one form of AI. There's a lot of different AIs out there that are being implemented right now. One of the more horrifying things that I think about is the day that AI really gets integrated with drone warfare. And I imagine China is very on top of that right now. And it's just, there's definitely some sort of horrifying things out there. Do you remember, you're a Utah guy, so, you're very aware of Mitt Romney and all that. Do you remember when Romney was running in 2012 and his entire election was derailed by the book of the binder of women comment that he'd said? 100%. And yeah, that was just, or Tim Kaine with his weird yell he did at a rally. There's a couple of different things that you've seen, just a single soundbite completely derail presidential campaigns. And now I think that people, especially in the age of Trump and sort of the nature of politics today, I think the threshold is a lot higher for a single soundbite to derail a campaign, but it's still out there. And if you have one fake video that gets widely circulated, that could very easily change people's minds. It's just like, in journalism, you put out one story that's bad because you had a bad source or something, you can issue a correction. A 10th, a 20th, the amount of people are going to see the correction versus who saw the original bad story, and I think it'll be like that with AI, and it'll be really hard to put those back in. I almost wonder, as this goes on, I almost wonder if the, I guess the desire to attend in-person events is going to increase, because it'll be the only way for people to know that what they're hearing and seeing is real, right? Like, do you think in-person events are going to become a lot more important going forward?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think people are going to want a lot more human connection than a digital connection. And one thing that's interesting that I have noticed with AI, while it's cool to see like the generated video here and there, a lot of people still prefer, at least in my industry, they want a human talking to them. I saw a guy, I won't name his name, but he put out an AI video of him and said, "Hey, my team has put this together and we're, just trying to scale." And, he's done quite well. And pretty much every comment was like, "Hey, man, we like hearing you talk as you, and we don't want to see some synthetic character of you. So we appreciate you sharing this with us, but please just stick to us seeing you as opposed to what you just shared with us." Right? Yeah.
I mean, you've seen the backlash against some companies that have put out completely AI generated commercials and they just look horrible. And you're like, dude, don't fire your CGI guys, because this has not caught up yet. Like, there's some bad. I mean, I was at a football game. I was at the Vikings-Eagles game a couple of weeks ago with some friends, and in US Bank Stadium there, they put up this like AI generated segment, and it was just weird, man. Like, it felt gross, and I don't know. Like I said, I see the utility in large language models and ChatGPT, but when it comes to the like the art side of it, like, man, it's not there. Like, it's you just can't replace a human yet on that front. I think a lot of people think that AI, like the artists, were going to be the first to be replaced. I actually think it's the other way around. I think a lot of white collar jobs are going to get replaced that require zero creativity. I think a lot of accountants, a lot of hospital coders, things like that are going to lose their job. It's not going to necessarily be the artists, because I think human art is a really hard thing to replicate for AI right now. So
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, even if someone wants to get a book published right now and they reach out to a literary agent, and in their query, it's specifically, you have to state, well, what if you used AI for anything, and you're not allowed to use AI for any of your prose. And I mean, it's just, so yeah, there's some safeguards in place to maintain the integrity of creativity, because you're not creative if you're using AI to write a story.
Speaking of AI, like on that front, I hate that. Like, I've always been, anybody can look at my social media, I'm a ferocious proponent of the Oxford comma and M dashes. And all of a sudden M dashes became this sign that AI wrote it. And I'm like, no, man, M dashes existed a long time before AI came around, and I've been a big fan. I feel like they're like the multi-tool of punctuations. They're like a Leatherman. I love them. I probably overuse them, to be completely honest. But like, yeah, that overuse. Nobody's accused me of using AI to write yet, but just the fact that I'm aware of that, I'm on this like crusade on social media. Like, no, man, M dashes alone do not prove an AI written story at this point. Let's calm down a little bit on that front. Anyways, I digress. Right. A little bit of a tangent there. I'm curious about some of the, I know a lot of your work is covered by NDAs and you can only talk about so much, but I am curious, is there a time where your OSINT work has, very clearly changed something, whether that's a policy or a platform takedown or just somebody getting help? Is there anything that you can share on that front?
But yeah, no, I mean, I can share some stuff that's not like on a major non-disclosure. I'll give you an example. I'll still be kind of vague with details on this, but I'll be more specific than I was with that. I had a venture capital, VC firm reach out to me and say, "Hey, these guys want us to invest in this thing, and we're not 100% sure we want to do it. We were just curious if you could, verify some stuff. Can you look at all this stuff we were sent, and can you just see if there's anything amiss?" And so I was like, yeah, absolutely. No problem. And so I worked on it for about a day and a half, maybe 2 days. And it turned out that everything from banking documents to signatures to all different types of personal information to make it look completely legitimate was completely doctored. And one of the ways I found out that the signature wasn't right is because the person that they said that they were, and I was really lucky on the OSINT side, okay, but the person that they said that they had signed a few books as a public figure, not many. I was lucky to find one of those books on eBay with really good pictures from the front and the back, and it was signed. And I was able to compare that signature to the other signature. So there was like 3 or 4 smoking guns in that investigation, and that was one of them to say, hey, look at this. And as we continued to dig into this organization had been working on scamming all different types of, I'm going to say, investment firms, just in a broader sense, for tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if they got into those contracts, millions of dollars for a couple years. And this was a firm that claimed to be in the Middle East. It was not in the Middle East. It was in a couple other countries. And yeah, it was a really cool win because we saved them a lot of money and they were very happy with what we did. And yeah, I mean, that all happened within, 72 hours. I saved that company like $3 or $4 million.
What an impact. I mean, that's real saved money there. And yeah, looking up pictures on eBay to compare the signatures. I mean, that's where the, art versus craft, right? Like that's more on the art side to think, to be creative enough to think of that as an area that you might look. That's not just craft. There's a little bit of art there for sure. I mean, how do you feel about that? I know OSINT is probably largely craft, but what do you think about some of it being art?
I think you're right. I always tell students when I'm teaching them, I want you to think, I know you're an analyst and you're supposed to think analytically, but I want you to think creatively too. This guy has a business. His business name is Red Light Zone Investments. I want you to not just look at it, Red Light Zone. I want you to look at the abbreviation of what this business could be. I want you to just look at Red Light Zone with an LLC. I want you to put a core on the end of it. I want you to put an LTD for limited on the end of it. I want you to get as creative as possible to find as much data as possible about this business. So it is about creativity. It is about art. It's not just about analytics. The best analysts that I know are thinking creatively and analytically at the same time. They're coming up with things that people usually don't think of, because they've followed the pattern so long on certain bad guys that they're just like, okay, maybe this will work. Let's try this. And, sometimes it doesn't work, and that's okay. Because if it's working at least 60% of the time, you're having a lot of success.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's a pretty good batting average, right? Like 100%. I want to kind of go to another area of the world here, and I've got some specific stats here. So the Houthis, right? They've been attacking or targeting a lot of commercial shipping since like late 2023. There's been up to 100 plus incidents, just within that first year since they started, and over 80 plus confirmed strikes in 2024 alone. Have you done much work in that area, and how different is it verifying maritime claims versus something that's city based or, on land?
Okay. Yeah, let's just talk about Yemen as a whole. That is a black hole. And the reason that's a black hole is because the infrastructure there is not great, right? They probably have a 2G or 3G infrastructure at best. Their internet's pretty crappy over there for the most part. Now, I mean, there's been developments with things like Starlink and all that type of stuff, but I'm highly doubting that, the people of Sana are using Starlink regularly. But Yemen's tough. Yemen is tough to get information. Maritime stuff can be tough too. A lot of that is going to come in the more deep web side of OSINT, where you're actually paying a subscription to access a platform or something of that nature, or you have to have credentials to log into a platform like marine traffic or whatever. And I wouldn't consider myself a subject matter expert on maritime OSINT, but I'm going to give a shout out to a friend of mine who is. Her name is Ray Baker, and she is the maritime artiste.
Really?
Okay. She knows all things maritime. If Atlantis and OSINT, had something going on, she's a part of it. Right. So
does she have, I mean, I would love to talk to her as well, but you think about some of these things that are happening with UAPs and, UFOs, like that sort of thing there's all these theories about what's going on in or around the ocean. I wonder how much of that, like, I'm sure she was probably looking at that video that was released, that was brought up in testimony recently, of firing a Hellfire missile at that UAP, and then it just kept going on its course. Talk to somebody else who thinks that is almost definitely a drone, but drone warfare in Yemen is definitely a thing. But I wonder how much, when we discover, if we discover, alien life form or whatever, is it going to be because it's some OSINT people that were doing their deep dives on something and looking into this? People that are specializing in things like maritime research. Yeah,
I have no idea. There's the maritime side of it. There's the aerial side of it. There's all different kinds of moving pieces and data sets when it comes to OSINT. That side of it requires, I think, a little bit more technical savvy than a lot of the other sides.
The flight tracker stuff, though, like the aerial side, I imagine it goes deeper than this, but it's already pretty well known. There's like accounts that will follow Elon Musk's private jet. Aircraft have tail numbers and things like that. How much deeper does it go from there?
I don't track a lot of flights, to be honest. I feel like a lot of people are playing when they do that kind of stuff. Most of the stuff that I'm doing, if it's not a deliverable for a client, I'm doing something to improve my capabilities as an analyst. So not a lot to say on that, unfortunately.
So you don't know who was coming in and out of Epstein's Island, is what you're telling me.
No, not at this time.
Not at this time.
I could probably find a bunch of companies in that area of the world that were tied to some shady stuff, though.
Well, yeah. Can you give me like a recent geolocation project that you have worked on, or was there like a single clue that unlocked this location, or is it always like this rich tapestry of hints that lead up to finding something or someone?
I think it always starts with some piece of data, right? Now, I like to go out there on my own when I'm not working and I have time and I'm not with the kids and the wife, just to see what I can do to improve my skills that day. But yeah, usually like a client comes to me with a request, they've got at least 2 or 3 data points for me. And I try and just take that skeleton and add a heart, add lungs, other vital organs, and get it alive, essentially. So as far as geolocating people, yes, you do that, but a lot of that comes with just someone being foolish and not having a private like check mark on a Google Maps profile or something like that. Geolocation is getting a lot more difficult too, because as far as metadata goes, it's not like metadata gets posted into a photograph when it's put on Facebook or Twitter, X or LinkedIn or any of these platforms. The metadata immediately goes out right when the photo hits the platform or and is fully uploaded. So it's not like you can see GPS coordinates. And when someone says, hey, I went to this Thai restaurant with my friend yesterday, or checks into a Thai restaurant, do you really know that they're checking in right there to that Thai restaurant? Or are they trying to obfuscate their location to throw you off their trail? There's a lot of different things that go into it when you're trying to geolocate someone. I'm not saying it can't happen. It absolutely can. And geolocation, really more than anything, in my opinion, it's about knowing what certain things look like in the world. What do the signs look like? What do the curbs look like? What's the garbage can look like on Thursday morning? What do police cars look like? What's the foliage look like? Foliage. I can never say that word. You know what I'm trying to say? Foliage. I'm going to try to say it again. Anyways. So yeah, it's about looking for those details, right? One of the things I have my students do is I always give them a really hard challenge with a photo to tell me, hey, do you know where this photo is? So I'll go research a tradition in a certain country or some certain custom that's a little bit harder to figure out, but there's enough details in the photo if you think really, really hard about it that, hey, I could probably put this together. And what I used to do is, it was a photo of a family having Christmas in Poland. Now you might be able to tell that it was like somewhere in Eastern Europe. Mm-hmm. That is probably a dead giveaway. But one of the traditions in Poland is they have an empty chair at the dinner table. And a lot of people look at that and go, oh, someone's just not sitting there. But it's that specific detail that you have to look at, right? And it's like when you're looking at people smoking in certain countries, are they smoking like this? Are they smoking like this, right? I mean, you have to learn. It's a lot more than just, hey, I researched about this. I'm learning everything I can about a person's pattern of life, how I can build a dossier on this individual. What is there that I can exploit or leverage or whatever to build this fuller picture so I can answer my intelligence requirement?
Yeah, I mean, that specifically makes me think of that scene in Inglourious Bastards in the basement where they get revealed because they put up 3 the wrong way, not like Germans do.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
They did like, Americans, not, I think it's like with the thumb in German.
It's Michael Fassbender who makes the mistake, right? Yep. I think.
It's one of those things where like, oh, yeah, it could be the smallest things sometimes that give you away. When you're looking at some of this stuff, though, I'm curious, like you've brought up all these different resources. Are there, for people that are looking at this, what are like the best free data sources for information verification right now? If just somebody's trying to vet, like you said, somebody coming in from LinkedIn or a business inquiry that lands in their email inbox, is there easy ways for people to vet information?
Yeah, they just call me. No,
and by the way, for people that do want to work with you, we'll definitely make sure that we put your website down there.
I'm just giving you a hard time, man. No, so really, like, you have to verify everything with like additional layers of information. So if someone says, my name is Jack Nicholas, and I have a company called Rose Gold Incorporated, and I live in Mississippi. Go to the Mississippi's Secretary of State Business Registry and look up Rose Gold Incorporated and see if Jack Nicholas is attached to that specific business. Look at records for whatever city in Mississippi. You can just Google it. Hey, what's the county in Mississippi for this business? And see if there's any civil cases or criminal cases against a business called Rose Gold Incorporated in Mississippi. Start with really basic stuff like that for verification. And it'll take a lot more time to get into the deeper stuff, but that's a good starting point of just, understanding. And then you could go to Google too, and you can do what's a basic Google dork, and you type in Jack Nicholas in quotes, okay? And then you do plus, that's not a plus, the plus sign, and then in quotes, Rose Gold Incorporated, and enter that into Google. And you're telling Google, I want you to isolate a search just to Jack Nicholas and Rose Gold Incorporated. Can I see any information on those businesses? Another thing that they could do is they could just pull up Rose Gold Incorporated if it's a website, or maybe just Rose Gold Inc., right? Or Rose Gold Business. People have really weird website names that even don't match their business sometimes. So there's just a few things that they could do to, start it out essentially.
Have you ever, were you tracking the Operation Kronos that happened against Lockbit back in 2024? Are you familiar with that at all?
No.
Well, it kind of highlighted how public clues can help with these really big cases. And I just kind of wonder what OSINT angles are, moving these cyber investigations for when it comes to like the actual judicial process. How much of publicly sourced information is actually even admissible in court? Have you ran into that? So
I have not been a witness or anything like that. I've worked several different cases in a legal aspect and supported law firms and stuff like that. I honestly never reached out and said, hey, was this used in court or anything like that? I really wasn't interested. And so but I know from other people who do OSINT, and have been in investigations much, much longer than me. There's a lot of OSINT data that doesn't get considered at all. I think some of it's getting better, but it is really a fine line with ethics. Like breach data, for example. Hey, I want to use this breach data in court. Yay, this is compromised information of people with social security numbers and all this kind of stuff. There's certain lines I think that you just don't cross. But again, that's up to the judge. It's up to, the courts. And I really just try to provide the support. I haven't had real interest in sitting in a courtroom and being a witness. And I still don't. I just don't want to do it.
Well, I mean, and on that, as far as things showing up in courtrooms, like, are there any cyber specific crimes that you're looking at as a trend right now that you're like, oh, that's going to be super trackable? Like, we're going to be able to really stay on top of this. Or are there any trends like that you're seeing?
Oh man, cybercrime is it's so big and it's always evolving. There's just so much out there. So it's really hard to just say, hey, this is going to be something we can track, because the minute that you're looking at this one crime, there's a new crime that's coming out somewhere else. So I'll give you an example, like on Telegram, okay, which we like to call the Wild West for bad guys, because it's an app where the monitoring is extremely poor. And while Pavel Durov, I think is his name, like implemented some different policies after he was detained in France that made it, maybe a grain of rice safer than it was before. You can still find a ton of bad guys on Telegram. So it's a great place to just monitor bad guys and learn about what they're doing. And as far as fraud goes, the level of fraud on Telegram is freaking mind-blowing. It is people selling their services. It's people working together to build out a better service package or offering. I was looking actually just this last couple of weeks at this Chinese AI face swap company, and they're, oh yeah, we're up on the up and up and all these things. And as I continue to dig into this Chinese AI face swap company, it turns out that they also do deepfake porn. Right? So they're selling the family-friendly version of like AI face swap. Yeah, woo, so much fun. Oh, by the way, here's our other website that does deepfake porn. It's completely non-consensual, and we'll take whatever image or video you upload, and we'll do with what you want us to do with it. And that company specifically was incorporated not just in China but in Delaware. Well, in Delaware, they have a law against that, and I don't remember what the law is offhand. So obviously that's illegal.
Deepfakes of people in promiscuous situations, like, God, if that law is not on the books in every state, it needs to be.
I think there's 41 states or something like that. There's like 9 that aren't. I might be off on that, but I'm pretty sure that's right. So yeah, but that's what they do, is they set up in Delaware, make themselves look legitimate, and nobody's the wiser, because unless you have a trained eye, you're like, oh cool, yeah, this person's incorporated in Delaware, everybody's incorporated in Delaware, and look, super fun for my kids to face swap, but you peel back the layers and it's like, oh my gosh, these guys are terrible people, and they're not in it for family fun stuff or family friendly or whatever. So
that's that's literally horrific. And as we were talking about AI earlier, I just kind of completely forgot about that aspect of deep fakes and the kind of threats and sexual harassment, and really real stuff, especially when you start thinking about kids in that situation. Like there's some really horrific rabbit holes to go down in this world, as I'm not really, I know this, but for everybody listening, it's like the more you think about it, the more you're like, wow, this is actually really terrifying.
So let me just give you an example. Like, you're talking about extortion. Let's talk about sexual extortion for a minute. So there are people out there who will specifically target high net worth individuals and people connected to those high net worth individuals, act like they want to be in a relationship with them or something like that, get that person to send explicit photos, and then the scam comes with this sexual extortion of, actually, thanks for these. I'm going to send these to all your family members, and let's do that, right? So that's just one example. It's not just high net worth people, but it's everybody that they can extort. It's get on Snapchat, think you got a new friend, and someone sends something they shouldn't send, and then boom, hey, you don't pay me, I'm gonna $5,000 in Bitcoin or whatever, I'm gonna send this to everybody that you know, and so they get these people in compromising situations. There's a group out of Nigeria. I think they're called the Yahoo Boys, if I remember correctly, and they do a lot of this stuff in relation to like sexual extortion. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of crackdown on it. And I can't remember the guy off the top of my head who has been at the forefront of fighting this sexual extortion stuff, but I'll remember it later, and that's another person I should connect you with.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of the darker corners of the world that we're talking about here, but it's very important and it does impact everyday people. There are people right here in the United States that get exploited by some of these schemes, and it's legitimately, you know, terrifying stuff. And yeah, I mean, when you think about, you know, if you have a client that hires you to help with that sort of situation, and now all of a sudden you find yourself in, you know, the Nigerian space, and they don't speak English and all of that. Is there sort of like missteps that you see Western analysts make when they're working in non-English spaces?
Yeah, I would definitely say there's missteps I see those people making. I decided when I would actually launch this firm and do everything that I've been doing for the last 3 years that I would have as many resources in place as possible for language and nuance and all that stuff. So that's not an issue I run into. But yes, people will assume because Google Translate said something that it said that that's actually what it means, and they'll miss a nuance or something like that, and they'll actually miss something entirely when they're working on an investigation. And that's just because they're relying on something, hitting a wall, and not reaching out to somebody that could do it. Or maybe they don't have the resources to reach out to somebody who could do it. Right.
I mean, in your line of work, it really helps to have a deep Rolodex. And I think that's another thing that you probably took with you from your journalism career is you had a wide network. And now going into, you know, as you were going into OSINT, it's like you have all these people that you can reach out to that are, you know, legitimate experts in a lot of different areas, people from all over the world that can clue you in. I'm sure that was a huge help as you were getting into things.
Oh, absolutely. I am as good as I am at what I do because of a lot of the international relationships that I built. I understand those places of the world without even having stepped foot in them because of the 1,000 hours of conversation I've had with someone in that country about a variety of different things, you know? And that has helped me so much to have that global source network. Amazing amount of help for that.
Yeah. Well, and you know, another thing that I get asked about a lot is, again, just coming from the journalism world, people kind of, as bad as opinions are about journalists, and in some cases they're earned, but I really hate the large sweeping generalizations that get made. But I'll say in my real life interactions, people often ask about, you know, hey, where can I find stuff that I can trust? You know, news that I can trust, and all these sorts of things. And what they're alluding to is the proliferation of misinformation and disinformation out there. Can you share some of the just immediate disqualifiers that people need to be looking out for when it comes to misinformation and disinformation?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So disinformation, for example, a lot of disinformation, there's several different patterns. I actually have an entire like PowerPoint presentation for disinformation and that I teach. It's been a minute since I've taught it, so give me a second to like remember a little bit of it. But there's all different types of patterns to look for, right? So disinformation will be easier for me to address first, and then I get into misinformation. So disinformation, you are going to see maybe on X, a lot of X accounts with several numbers after their name are spitting out the exact same message. That could be one indicator that you're looking at disinformation at a larger scale, right? With like a bot network or farm or whatever. Because you'll take those screen names and you'll try to dive in any of those screen names and you won't get any information back. So going back to dissidents, there's a Chinese artist that gets targeted often by a lot of these types of bot networks that are obviously still just China-based bot networks, and they'll all say the same things to him on social media or privately in social media, and then you'll try and dive into what's been said to this individual, and you won't get anywhere because all of these usernames are just dummy accounts, essentially. when you're looking at disinformation, you want to look at the language that matters to specific countries. So China, there's certain things and certain keywords and phrases that matter to the country. One of them is like mainland. So if you typed in mainland and like even Google Translate, because most things are written in simplified Chinese on the internet, not most of them are traditional Chinese. So if you put in the word mainland and it translates into the Chinese characters, and then you popped in mainland into X, you would see a lot of people who probably had sympathies towards the Chinese state. Not everybody, but a lot of people would have sympathies because mainland is that specific phrase. You could plug that into a place like Facebook and you'd also see, maybe someone's talking about reunification of the mainland. See, so it's one key word that brings us to another point. Now I've gone from mainland to reunification of the mainland, and now I'm actually finding that disinformation network and getting more into the nitty gritty of those bots and things like that. I think misinformation is really a matter of just looking at the work that's presented. If it's poor quality, if it's not well sourced, if you read it and it feels like it's generated by artificial intelligence, those types of things. So that's kind of where I'd go with that. But another thing about disinformation, it can be a lot more broad, right? There can be disinformation campaigns. How do you find stuff like that? It's a lot harder to find stuff like that, but it always still starts with the data point. Maybe it's mainland, maybe it's something else. But once you start digging and seeing certain sources, another area that you'll find a lot of disinformation comes from independent media sources. And I don't mean like stuff that's just a smaller source than CNN. I mean an independent media source that has some type of loyalty to a foreign country, but it's operating in a different country. So that's another area where you'll see disinformation.
Yeah. And it's another one of those things that, when we look at how elections are impacted and things like that, I tell people, you're a fool if you don't think that our adversaries are trying to insert disinformation, if anything, just to insert chaos into the system. It's not even that they want this person or that person to be elected. It's that they're trying to undermine the entire system of democracy. And disinformation is probably one of the easiest tools out there to leverage for, people, entities like nation states that have the resources that nation states do, even smaller ones like Iran or North Korea, right? Like they have significant resources to leverage disinformation campaigns.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The resources are exponential. You talked about Iran, so I'll touch on that for a second. Iran, a lot of their disinformation comes from the religious side of things, from the more extremist element within Shia Islam. And a lot of that comes from the religious institutions that they have in the United States, where some of those religious institutions are loyal to Ali Khamenei, right? The supreme leader or Ayatollah of Iran. And so they'll celebrate the Iranian Revolution at that specific, religious institution or organization. Or they might send students from the United States to go study in Iran, which most people would think when they hear something like that, oh, that doesn't sound right. All the sanctions, embargo. No, it's been happening since the early 1990s. So they export that particular ideology back to the United States. And, they've been doing it for a little over 30 years.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I could go book a ticket into Tehran today, right? Like there's no sort of legal blockades from Americans traveling to Iran right now. I don't think. You might have a little bit of a tough time being with your previous background, but yeah, me specifically. So. Yeah. I mean, there's a few places I'm not going to, Iran, Russia, and China are all, I would love to go visit China. Right. I've said in Russia, it's literally kind of like I have an actual written out bucket list, it's just really a list of goals, but I want to take the Trans-Siberian Railway from St. Petersburg to Vladivostok someday. I hope that I get that opportunity, but in the current state of things and with some of the work that I've done and the targeting that's happened, I don't know that I could look my wife in the eyes with a straight face and say that I'll be completely fine and not be used as, being accused of being a spy or something like that, So yeah, there's definitely some places I'm not going to. But, and honestly, same thing with, I'd probably be fine going to Pakistan, but again, I'm not going to risk it. Plenty of Americans go to Pakistan all the time to go climb K2. But like, I don't know, there's just some places that I don't, and I'm a pretty adventurous guy. Like there's not a lot that I get real scared of travel wise, but there's just some places where it doesn't pass my common sense test of, Marty, is the juice really worth the squeeze? Because you might get squeezed if you go there, and just stuff to keep in mind. But, on that note though, like, yeah, I'm a guy that's gone around the world reporting and doing, I did the conflict reporter thing for a while there. I've done a lot of different things in a lot of different places. For a long time, the big thing that we'd tell journalists and even people from like the State Department or policymakers was, we wanted them to go take first aid classes to be able to learn how to put a tourniquet on and do these different things if they found themselves in a dangerous situation, a bombing or, something else that happens in some of these corners of the world. And it was making sure that people going to those areas had basic first aid, tactical combat casualty care, TCCC type skills to keep them and their friends alive in those bad situations. But today, not that threat is completely gone. Those are still relevant skills for journalists and policymakers to have. But what are you kind of telling journalists today that like needs to be in their OSINT toolkit? Like what are you telling them they need to know going, if they're going to go and, go abroad and into some of these like hairier corners of the world in the pursuit of reporting?
Yeah, I'll be transparent on that. I'm not telling journalists anything. If somebody needs some help to be able to stay safer in a different country, I'm probably just connecting into some case officer who's a friend or something like that. And they're sitting down with them for 30 minutes and just making sure they have a good story. So, if they go to Belarus, they don't get rolled up by some group or something like that,
Yeah, that's, I always point people to, generally speaking, to Clint Emerson's book, Escape the Wolf. I don't know if you know Clint or not, but he's, I would absolutely look into that. His book, it came out, I came across his book around the same time that I met you, actually. And it's all these really great common sense. It's not OSINT specific, but I think he actually touches on sort of like digital safety and your online footprint and things like that. But I always point people in that direction. But, more broadly though, with everything that you're looking at, you are going into, like I said, the deep web, the dark web, the regular web, all these different places. Is there anything happening in the world today that's really kind of keeping you up at night? Maybe not literally keeping you up, but like what are you looking at and saying like this is potentially a really big problem?
So as far as keeping me up at night, now there's not really anything that's like just pulsing in my brain. I think sometimes I come upon stuff and I'm like, oh my gosh, what's this connected to? And what's this connected to? And what's that connected to? And sometimes those don't really pan out. It's like, oh, I thought this was some big criminal syndicate, but it ended up being that they actually they have some exception through like, I'll give you an example. I was looking at something one time, Iran based. And when you think about Iran, you always have to think about sanctions. And they were doing some business in the United States through some vehicle, and it was a saffron company. And saffron is the most expensive spice in the world, and it's known as red gold. And, I'm thinking, man, maybe this stuff is financing, Hezbollah or the IRGC or something like that. So I dug into it. And because saffron is considered like a food, right? It's got an exemption in U.S. laws for where it's not a sanctioned good, essentially, right? There are several different things that are kind of odd that are sanctioned in Iran, but saffron wasn't sanctioned. So I was like, oh, okay. But let me just continue to dig because there's like this U.S. connection. Because if there was any U.S. institution or business and they were sending money to a financial institution in Iran, it would be a sanctions violation 100%. But I didn't find any of that, and I kind of just closed the book on that. And I was like, oh, okay, that wasn't anywhere near as interesting. The things that really keep me up are the longer investigations. It's when I've spent 1.5 or 2 years on one specific target or threat. I don't want to get into too many details on this, and the reason being is because I've sent this to higher parties and things like that. But I was looking into an individual, and something was just off about his connections in East Asia. And as I continued to dive into this individual, I keep finding these things that were off, but I had no like definitive smoking gun to be like, I can move this to someone else and they can take some action, or maybe it starts an intelligence case or something like that. Well, this particular individual a couple months ago decided to pop their head up a little bit more than they should have. Obviously, they weren't aware that they were being watched, but they were, right? Not just by me, but by several other people. And because they popped their head up, which was like 19 or 20 months into me just continuing to monitor this specific thing, I was able to find that smoking gun that made them a national security threat, right? But I talk about that, and it took that long. It was not this instant thing. It's not instant pudding or instant oatmeal. It's sitting there and monitoring and looking for changes. Sometimes it's a boring day of, man, there's nothing interesting that's come out, but I had to check if there was, and then it takes 6 weeks to see something new. But this guy had 16 different companies and a bunch of other things, and super, super interesting. And we'll see where that goes. I have no idea at this point. So,
yeah, I mean, that's interesting that you bring up how long some of these investigations can take, because I think for the average person, if you ask them, what an OSINT analyst does, they would, if they even know what that is, they probably have an idea in their head of somebody that fits the typical like hacker stereotype where like, oh yeah, we're going to go do an OSINT investigation. They imagine some dude grabbing some a bag of Doritos and a box of Little Debbie snacks and a bunch of caffeine, and they're going to put their headphones on, and they've got 3 monitors, and they're just going to like crush for 24 hours straight and come out with an answer at the end, like all wide-eyed and caffeinated, like, I figured it out. I linked all these pictures together and found all these documents. And I think that's what people think it is, because that's often how it's portrayed, like you said, by some of these popular OSINT accounts are like, oh, we found where this person is or where they're from, and by linking all these, and it all happens within 24, 48 hours. And it's like, no, man, like the type of work that you're doing, it's like you said, I mean, could take years in some circumstances. And I don't think enough people really understand that, that aspect to it. It's a lot closer to, again, what I would call traditional or long-standing intelligence work than it is like more contemporary or how it's portrayed in movies or on social media.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's funny that you say that because, sometimes I'll have a client come to me and they'll be like, hey, I need you to look into this and I need you to look into that and da 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 da. And I'm like, well, let me set your expectations from the get-go. This is open source intelligence. So that means it's these specific data sets, and it means that, we're not going to work any miracles for you. If what is out there that you think is out there, I'll find it. And yes, I'll bring it to you. But your expectation of this is going to be, I only got 12 hours, got to have you send me this, find everything under the sun. I want a 14-page report, 3-page executive summary, whatever the unrealistic expectation is. These are people I never do business with because you can't ever get through the barrier of them just understanding, hey, there is a chance that I am not going to be able to answer what you want answered. And they won't accept that. They won't take that chance, and that's fine. But there are those unrealistic expectations. I have people come to me sometimes too and ask me, hey, can you like tap phones and stuff like that? And I'm like, yeah, what? They're like,
that's not
you're
open
like
source.
Right, I know. And they're like, can you infiltrate this online community? And it's like, okay, yeah, there are certain other things I can do outside of the OSINT space. I'm not going to talk about that, but they just ask these really unrealistic or unethical expectations. And I've had a few of them where I've just been like, all right, well, I'm going to call another buddy because of what this person just asked me to do and see where that goes with them, because that was so unethical or that was so out there that I'm concerned about that specific request that came in, I had on that note, I had someone reach out to me one time on LinkedIn, and I'll share full details of this. And they were located in Hong Kong, and they said, "Hey, Justen, we see that you're really good at OSINT and stuff like that." And I don't have anything against Hong Kong, but I have to be way more careful talking to people in that area, just in the event that they are being influenced by, mainland China, CCP, all that type of stuff. But I'm talking to this guy, and he's like, "Yeah, we got a client, and he needs some work done to be able to see, if there's some good business environments for him to set up some stuff in Hungary, needs some research done, et cetera, et cetera." And so, oh yeah, I was like, okay, so he's your client in Hong Kong, and he's like, "Oh, I can't discuss that." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." I was like, "So, I mean, what are the details here? What's the interest here?" He's like, "Oh, we're just setting up some tech stuff, nothing too crazy. We'll pay you several $1,000s for the work, so don't worry about like us not paying our bills or anything. We'll even pay you in advance." And I'm like, "So tech stuff in Hungary, you don't want to tell me you're even anything about your client. Okay. So you're real confidential on this stuff." And they're like, yeah. I mean, you seem to be really good at just, finding things that people can't find. And we just need someone who can find some of that stuff that people can't find. And we may have some other requests, down the road, that might not apply too much to this, but discretion is really important in this instance. So I'm not really going to share more, if that's okay. So let me know if you're interested. And then they continued to message me. I never responded to them. Every single day for like 3 weeks, they'd message me, "Hey, Justen, thing in Hungary. We talked here on LinkedIn yesterday." Again, and so on and so forth. And obviously, there was some big red flags in that message, right?
I mean, not just the message itself, but the fact that they were so persistent in messaging every single day. That's not what professional organizations do. And especially if you're any sort of big company, it's like, okay, if this service provider doesn't want to respond to his messages, we're going to move on to somebody else that answers their messages, right? Like that's most big companies. That's how they do business. Bunch of different red flags there. I guess it just goes to show that like you've really got to be on the lookout out there, and even for somebody like you, it's it may take more than a few interactions for you to confirm that it is in fact a bad actor. Yeah, absolutely. We when I was doing the StrikeSource thing, we put out an article one time that was about VPNs in China, and that was an OSINT based article, and it got a lot of traction. And the specific thing was it was focused on a VPN provider, and I'm not going to mention the provider just because things have changed with that provider, so it wouldn't be completely accurate for me to say what that provider was now versus what it used to be. Mm-hmm. But that provider had a bunch of data centers that were close to like military installations and government buildings and things like that. And so that was what the article focused on. So we got reached out to by that VPN provider. Their director of communications asked us, "Hey, will you pull this down? This information is not accurate." We knew everything was accurate. And if they wanted us to really pull it down, they better send a cease and desist letter from an attorney. We never got a cease and desist letter, but what we did get is harassment for an entire month. Whether it was me or anybody that was part of the team at StrikeSource that I had put together. And we knew what we'd put out was accurate. What we had said about this particular VPN provider that was a Chinese VPN provider was accurate. They didn't send a cease and desist. No attorney got involved because they knew that in discovery, everything would have been proven that we said was correct. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that was another thing that we dealt with on the flip side. And that was a crazy month.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's all sorts of, someday maybe you'll be able to talk about some of this stuff in more detail, but it is really interesting to get this sort of an insight into this world. And yeah, I mean, I think it's worth, kind of banging on the table a couple of different times of like what you do is open source intelligence. You're not wiretapping, you're not breaking and entering, you're not doing, things that you might typically associate with like the CIA or tier 1 units or something like that. That's not what you do. You're taking what's already out there. Maybe it's hard to find, but it's out there and doing that. Like, I think that it's important for people to understand that and not blur those lines. All that being said, though, Justen, I really appreciate you taking the time today. I know you're a busy guy. I know, like you said in the bio you sent over to me, you said your wife is super pregnant. And I know it's a busy household. You got a couple of kids over there. You're busy doing all this stuff. For anybody that wants to reach out, whether it's about your services or otherwise, where can they find you? Where should we direct people?
Yeah, sure. You can reach it. I'm social media wise, I use LinkedIn more than anything. So you can literally just type in Justen Charters on LinkedIn. You'll see CEO of Uncharted. You can reach out to me there, or you can reach out to me at our website, which is just Uncharted. It's a UNCHARTERED.info. And if you have some kind of inquiry or something like that, feel free. You just want to talk OSINT. I love talking OSINT, love building out people in the community, supporting people where I can within reason. So yeah, that's about
awesome. And we'll link to all that stuff in the show description. And like I said, this is really interesting. It's not a world that I know a lot about. I've generally familiar, just again, my work in journalism and all of that. But, and I've of course been following you for a long time now and kind of broadly seeing your trajectory. So this is all really fascinating to actually dive deep into and see what you're all into. But all that being said, thanks for coming on, Justen. It's been great.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.